At my mother's funeral, my mother-in-law wore a smug grin as she declared, "This house will be inherited by my son." She strolled through the rooms, casually remarking, "I wonder if I should take this one." I forced a polite smile and corrected her, "Actually, I'm the one inheriting this house." Unfazed, she chuckled, "Oh, I know, but isn't it true that a wife's belongings belong to her husband? So, in a way, this house is my son's, right?" I sighed, questioning the absurdity of her logic. Cheerfully, she added, "From now on, let's get along." I frowned. "What do you mean by that?" With complete confidence, she declared, "I'm making this room mine." My stomach twisted. "Are you saying we'll be living together?" She beamed. "Exactly. With such a big house, it'd be a shame to waste the space. It's better to have company, don't you think?" I stared at her, stunned. My mother had just passed away, and yet my mother-in-law seemed oblivious to my grief. Couldn't she see the sadness on my face? This was not the time for jokes. This house held precious memories, built by my father, cherished by my mother. I refused to let it be tainted by her entitled presence. And my husband? He stood there, silent. His inaction made him just as guilty. If I wanted to protect my home, I would have to act first. I was a 42-year-old office worker, having spent my 30s single. I had nearly given up on marriage, but through an acquaintance, I met Michael, for years younger than me, and eventually, we married. Michael was kind, always prioritizing my opinions. "Where should we go for our honeymoon?" I had asked. "You mentioned Europe, right? But didn't you say you preferred the Maldives?" He replied, "Let's go there instead." He was thoughtful, always deferring to me. But then came the conversation about his mother. "My mom wants to live with us," he admitted one day. "Dad's health isn't great, and she's struggling to manage alone." I hesitated. "I understand she's going through a tough time, but didn't we agree before marriage that we wouldn't live together?" "You're right, I'll talk to her." Michael was good to me. I often felt guilty for how much he conceded, but there was one thing I regretted, never getting the chance to show my father my wedding. He had been a strict, hard-working man, and I deeply respected him. Our family wasn't rich, but my father's dedication had built us a comfortable home. A home big enough to hold my mother's funeral when she, too, passed away 2 years later. At the funeral, Michael had been by my side. "Are you okay? Do you want to take a break in the back room?" he asked, always looking out for me. I had been grateful, but then, Nancy, my mother-in-law, arrived. "My deepest condolences," she said, her tone almost too polite. "I truly sympathize with you." I nodded. "Thank you." We had never been close. Our relationship was distant but civil, until that day, until she revealed her true nature. After the ceremony, she approached me, her voice laced with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Thank you for handling the funeral so well," she said. "Everything went smoothly because of you." Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Now that the formalities are done, we can talk about real matters." I frowned. "Real matters?" She glanced around the house, admiring its structure. "Such a splendid home your parents had." Something about the way she said it made me uneasy. Then, before I could respond, she wandered deeper inside. I hurried after her. "Oh, Mom, some rooms are messy. Don't fuss over details." She waved off my protest. Then, with an air of finality, she declared, "This house will be inherited by my son. I think I'll take this room." I took a sharp breath. "Actually, I'm the one inheriting this house." She smirked. "I know, but since a wife's belongings belong to her husband, that means my son owns it too, right?" My patience wore thin. She smiled. "From now on, let's get along." I exhaled slowly. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "Oh, I mean turning this into my room." My hands clenched. "Are you saying we'll be living together?" Without hesitation, she nodded. "Exactly. I've decided. With such a big house, why let the rooms go to waste? Plus, I won't have to take care of my husband alone anymore." I felt my grief twist into anger. My mother had just died, and yet here she was, treating my home like some prize to be claimed. Michael, who had been watching from the doorway, finally spoke. "Mom, what are you saying? This isn't the time for this." Nancy scoffed. "Why make such a fuss?" Michael's voice hardened. "Just leave." He escorted her out, then turned to me apologetically. "Sorry, My mom can be unreasonable. I sighed. It's fine. Thanks for handling it. But I was wrong. I thought he had shut her down. I thought that was the end of it. 10 days later, when things had finally settled, we began discussing our future living arrangements. I suggested, "This apartment is cramped. Should we move back to my family home?" Michael agreed. "Yeah, with more belongings and the possibility of kids, it's a better option than this tiny place." Then, after a pause, he hesitated. "Well then, we should start preparing for the move." And that's when I realized. His perspective on the situation had been different from mine all along. I had something important to address regarding the move. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He paused for a moment, then said, "Considering how spacious the house is and all the empty rooms, I thought maybe my parents could move in with us." I was taken aback. "Wait, are you suggesting we all live together?" Lately, I'd noticed something shifting in my husband. I had always believed he valued my opinions, but now I was beginning to wonder if he was just going along with whatever everyone else wanted. His willingness to comply with my mother-in-law's requests, combined with this idea of living together, made me question whether he was truly making decisions on his own. Despite my repeated objections to cohabitation, he kept pushing for it, and I couldn't help but feel like he was putting his mother's desires above mine. "I've told you over and over again, we're not living together," I reminded him. He replied, "But Mom keeps insisting on it." I shot back. "During the funeral, you told her off. You stood up for me and said we wouldn't live together." He sighed. "Yeah, I was angry about her showing up uninvited, but that doesn't mean I'm completely against it. It just felt like such an inappropriate time to talk about it, you know?" Although he agreed with me in theory, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was more in tune with his mother's wishes. He avoided making any firm decisions, trying to appear neutral, but I knew better. People like him often convince themselves they're just mediators, but in reality, they're letting others take the lead. It was starting to get frustrating. "I will not live with someone who barged into my parents' home on the day of the funeral and claimed a room. That's final. Please tell your mom," I insisted. He exhaled deeply. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Fine, I'll let her know." When we got married, I had considered the possibility of living with my in-laws, but after seeing my mother-in-law's behavior during my mother's funeral, I couldn't imagine sharing a home with her, especially not in the house my father had built, and with my husband's unwillingness to stand firm. The idea of living with them felt impossible. A few days later, after I had made my stance clear, my husband decided to rearrange the living room. "What are you doing?" I asked, noticing the furniture was being moved around. He looked up. "I'm clearing space for 2 beds." My heart sank. "Are your parents coming to stay?" His response made everything worse. "No, they're moving in today." I couldn't believe it. Despite everything I'd said, my husband and mother-in-law were steamrolling me into this living arrangement. "Why is this happening?" I asked, my frustration mounting. "Their lease is up," he explained. "So, we thought they'd move in here instead of renewing. It'll be a little cramped, but we're moving soon, right? Just hang in there." "No, that's not the point," I said, my voice rising. "Why is cohabitation even on the table? I've told you before, I won't live with someone who walked into my parents' house during the funeral and claimed a room." "I'll talk to Mom," he said, "but we're living together now, so just get along with it." "Why do you always prioritize everything your mom says?" I shot back, frustration bubbling over. "It's not about prioritizing her," he insisted. "I listened to both of you, and I made a decision." But I knew it wasn't about making decisions, it was about him being influenced by his mother. He had fallen into her plan, thinking he was being fair and neutral. I used to think he was a kind man, but when he was around her, he became someone else, a man who was willing to force me into cohabitation with my in-laws. When my in-laws arrived, my mother-in-law immediately began complaining about the living conditions. I apologized for the sudden change and assured them it would only be temporary until the move. My father-in-law, Tony, seemed polite, but it was clear he was just going along with whatever my mother-in-law said. A few days later, my mother-in-law asked me to run an errand to buy a medicated patch. I couldn't believe it. Why was she making these decisions without even consulting me? It was a small thing, but it was a red flag. If we were to live together for any extended period, I could already see the potential for these kinds of impositions. It felt unsustainable. As my in-laws prepared to move into my parents' house, I decided to act. My mother-in-law was already excited about the idea of living there, and I needed to protect my parents' home. 10 days later, I sat them down and revealed my decision. I handed over the official court papers. I'm letting go of the house. It holds too much sentimental value for me, and I can't bear the thought of you living there. It's better to preserve it as a memory in my heart. My mother-in-law was furious. What are you thinking? Even if you're letting it go, you could have sold it. Why just abandon it? I remained calm. If I sold it, you'd just rely on the money. It's clearer this way. Her anger grew. We moved out of our last place for this. You know that. How will you make it up to us? I stood my ground. I've been clear from the beginning. I oppose cohabitation. Yet, without any real discussion, you've pushed it on me. I stood my ground, unwavering. My husband and mother-in-law sat in stunned silence, their faces drained of color, their voices caught in their throats. My father-in-law glanced between them, clearly bewildered, but I wasn't finished. Michael, I continued, my voice steady, I've been thinking about getting a divorce. What do you think? He stammered, divorce? Before he could fully process my words, my mother-in-law erupted. Michael, divorce this ridiculous woman immediately. I had expected that reaction from her. What I really wanted to see was whether my husband could make a decision on his own, without his mother's influence. Mom, he mumbled hesitantly. But I had already made up my mind. His response didn't matter anymore. Fine, divorce is the only option, my mother-in-law snapped. My father-in-law added, Michael, your mother insists. It can't be helped. And just like that, my husband caved. Well, you want a divorce too, right? Maybe it's for the best. Even at this crucial moment, he couldn't stand on his own. He wasn't making a choice, he was just going along with whatever was easiest. Very well, I said calmly. Let's proceed with the divorce. I packed only the essentials and left that night, checking into a budget hotel. The next morning, I took time off work and headed to the courthouse. It was time to take care of business. The truth about the house. A few days later, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, her voice brimming with rage. What the hell is going on? I just found out that the house is going to you. Why? I wasn't surprised by her outburst. Ah, so you learned about it through the estate division process? Yes, that house belongs to me, she screeched. You forged documents and deceived us. I let out a small sigh. Why would I forge court documents? They're completely legitimate. Then why is the house still yours? You renounced the inheritance. Well, I said, smiling to myself, I withdrew that application. Her breath hitched. Inheriting property follows strict legal procedures, but renouncing an inheritance isn't instant, it takes about a month to finalize. Until then, the application can be withdrawn at any time. The documents I had shown them were from the early application stage, not the final approval. In truth, I had never intended to give up the house. I simply wanted to see how my husband would react. If he had fought for our marriage, shown even a shred of independence, I might have reconsidered, but he hadn't. So the house really is yours, my mother-in-law growled. Then, after a brief pause, she snapped. Since you got it before the divorce, it should be considered joint property. That means you're supposed to sell it and split the money. I had expected this. If it were an asset we acquired together, yes, it would be divided. But inheritance is a separate category, it isn't subject to property division. She refused to give up. Then what about the money Michael should get from the divorce? I kept my tone neutral. We weren't married long enough to have significant joint assets. Maybe the car, though it still has an outstanding loan. She called me selfish, heartless, but I was done explaining myself. I'm protecting that house because it's my parents' home. I won't let people like you live there. If you have any further complaints, talk to a lawyer. The end of it all. With that, the divorce process moved quickly, likely pushed along by my mother-in-law herself. And just like that, it was over. I was free. I moved back into the house my parents left me, feeling a profound sense of peace. The walls seemed to radiate warmth, as if my parents were still watching over me. As for my ex-husband, he remained stuck with his parents. Despite one less person, their apartment likely felt even smaller now. My former mother-in-law tried to secure a better place, but their age made it difficult to pass rental screenings. In the end, my ex-husband had to rent a small house for them, a far cry from the grand home she had envisioned. The rent was likely higher, and the burden of supporting his parents fell entirely on him. Initially thrilled at the idea of taking over my father's house, my former mother-in-law now found herself in a cramped home with fewer comforts than before. I wonder if she ever realized how much she lost because of her greed. Meanwhile, I had everything I needed, the home where my happiest memories lived, and the freedom to start anew. And that was more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.